Yeah, thank you very much, Christoph, for this nice introduction. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be invited and have the opportunity to speak to you about this challenging topic. And ESTEP will be introduced in the course of the presentation. And what I like about the title and this question, because implicitly by the wording we can conclude that there is today a leadership, and I feel as such. And so therefore there's really some risk at a stage that with this transformation and the decisions lying ahead of us, we may lose this leadership of the European steel industry. And we've already heard by a couple of presentations, so from World Steel and also from Alex at the first one, about the situation. How do we see the future of demand of steel? And on this slide I put this in comparison to other very important materials ensuring prosperity of the world and citizens. And my belief, and I also want to make this little disclaimer, so I'm using the ESTEP slides, and I'm speaking as Klaus Peters with the background of my experience, but don't consider that my presentation here is a consolidated result of the full membership of ESTEP. So, and I strongly believe that this needs to be solved. The decoupling of the high volume production of such materials from its environmental footprint. So reducing the production of the materials will not be a solution. And with this starting point, I'd like now to go to the question, do we have a fast track to the global leadership? And I guess you will not be surprised that the answer is no, there is no fast track. On the contrary, keeping such strong position is hard work. And in particular, as we see that we have technology options at hand, and this is rather a basket than a single one. We already heard these buzzwords, there is no blueprint for everyone and no silver bullet. Fully agreed with these analysis. And one additional important observation we can make is that while we agree that we have a problem with climate change, the temperature rise of the planet, and this is related to the CO2 emissions, and we also agree where we want to be. We want to be with climate neutral production and being the first climate neutral continent as Europe. And the tricky question is, how do we do the transformation? And how do we do the transformation in a way that the vast majority of today's industry, in particular the steel industry and all the ecosystem of steel survives? And you see that I put here, this cannot be done and solved out of the competence and power of the steel industry alone. It needs to be really an agreed pathway from all the stakeholders, and I'm not reading out all of these, otherwise I will not stay in time. And it's visualized by Roland Berger on the right, how the transformation can be done by these cartoon pictures. But we know that in reality the transformation is much more complex. Many times the steel producers first need to install additional capacity which enables them to produce steel in a green way. And once this ramp up is successful, step by step, today's operation is taken out of operation and demolished. So this is very challenging and stretching objective and target lying ahead of us. And if it's about defining the leadership and the future role of the European steel industry, we also need to have some agreement about two basic questions, I believe. Otherwise, it's very difficult to have meaningful discussions among the various stakeholders. So the first question is, do we agree that we need an European steel industry in the future? Or can we say steel is an important material? Of course, Europe will not continue to exist without the material steel, but it's not necessary to have it locally produced. You will not be surprised that I'm biased with this question. Of course, I say we need an European steel industry. Second is, and I think also many others, also policy decision makers agree with the sentence, but then we come to the second question which goes hand in hand, and this is how do we define steel industry? And therefore on my second slide I already put on the lower part some helping visualization to define the steel industry if you just consider these four big blocks. So the preparation, the iron making, with or without melting, depending on the route, steel making, and then rolling and finishing, so the downstream. And I strongly believe if not at least the melting is taking place, we should not talk about this as a steel industry. That's then something more like a process industry. So starting with slabs, for instance, that's a very different shape and value chain and also ecosystem with suppliers and the customers. Lots of the technology also lies in the steel making, in the steel shop, and not only in the rolling and annealing processes. And here I don't see already a full agreement among the various stakeholders. So one action point I like to mention is to address this more. For instance, I like very much the slogan of Eurofair, stronger with European steel. This is very powerful, easy to memorize, strong message. However, it's not fully putting attention to the importance to keep the full value chain, at least from melting here in Europe. And we've already visited the point that, yes, Europe has a global leadership. And why is this so? And why do we have the full agreement about the analysis, where do we are and where do we want to go? And this is summarized on this slide with the various pledges from the steel producers around the world. And at the same time, because yesterday I spent some time in updating the entries in the table, and I realized that this is a very fast developing work within all the steel producers. In the past I used an old slide just saying, yes, all the steel producers commit to go green and acknowledge the challenging and the climate change problem. And looking into the details, we can see that the way the story is told is very company specific. There is no overarching full agreement how to commit to become climate neutral. Some have targets in the very near futures, others with their own methodology, how to account for CO2 emissions, other with a science-based methodology. And as we are here in Linz, maybe the very single concrete example from voestalpine, they put on their webpage a countdown. So 11 years, a few months until they become climate neutral. So also here, in order to have a more powerful communication, I believe that also some harmonization in this storytelling can help, because if we put ourselves in the shoes of the reader of these publications, that's not easy. And we've already talked about the basket of technologies to do the decarbonization. And this is the way ESTEP displays the result. It's based on a project which was already mentioned by a previous speaker, the Green Steel for Europe European money-funded project. And we distinguish between the near-term, mid-term and long-term perspective. I don't want to go into the details because we already heard about the various parts. But a few statements I'd like to conclude from the slide. So the first is, yes, we are technology ready to do the transformation now, but there are still open questions. And some technologies need further pilot and demonstrator projects, while others can solve and answer the questions on the fly while doing the large size investments. Second, steel is extremely innovative in regard to also these processes, because the result of the main elements of the slide is going back to the year 21. And at this time, there was no idea of this primary melter allowing the combination of the DRI plant with the existing steel shop. And there was also no idea flying around about how to use the furnace, we call today blast furnace, but without having it really coke-fired, but maybe with some other material enabling the gases to be poured, but maybe with an ammoniac or with plasma burners, for instance. So within a very short period of time, smart people from the steel sector developed further ideas. And if we go into further details, for instance, collecting many of the ideas presented by speakers today, we could have many more points on the slide as well. And this also sells into the claim of being a leader as European steel sector and have a strong position in this regard. When it goes into putting PowerPoint into reality, so the last slide showed the possibility, the basket of technologies on the timeline. And Eurofair does a great job summarizing the communicated projects of the European steel producers in regard to their decarbonization efforts. And you will see that we use a clustering of the projects in the typical categories which were mentioned by a couple of previous speakers as already. So it's a circular economy, carbon direct avoidance, so going to hydrogen or electricity. And if you stay with carbon, then you do it smartly. So process integration. Another word could be material and energy resource efficient production. And of course, whenever there are gases created, these need to be captured and either utilized or stored. At the same time, we can see that covering the full map of Europe, it's a limited number of projects, so that's the charm of the steel industry. We have a reasonable number of projects to tackle the transformation of the European steel sector. And on the other end, we are quickly talking big numbers. So CapEx for these first installations is not the complete transformation of the European steel industry, according to the Eurofair data, is 31 billion euros. And OpEx depends on the time frame, of course, relying on high cost for electricity and or hydrogen. And this is for a 5/10 years base. 55, something like this, billion euros. And bringing back data from Brussels to its origin. So on this slide, Primetals did a very nice job summarizing the known projects towards this decarbonization of the steel on a worldwide landscape, and you can see the various approaches with DRI plants, electric arc furnaces, and smelters. And if you look into the distribution of these activities in regard to the regions, this is shown on the right side. And in Europe, with these numbers, so the 21 DRI announced projects, for instance, so Europe has more than 50% of all the worldwide announced projects. So I think this is an outstanding, clear justification for the claim of European leadership. And there's also some reasoning behind this fast speed we are observing here in Europe. And this is the legislative and regulative push towards this transformation. We already heard about the European Green Deal, and there are a couple of complementing rules in place. And on the left diagram, you see the European emission trading scheme, how in the very near future, the free allowances are phasing out in the 25, 6, 7, so it's still moderate, but then it's almost linear, going down to zero in 34. And this is a very big explanation and reasoning why Europe is so intensively working and being prepared to put green steel large size productions in place. And due to time, I will not go into all elements of each single slide. And in order to accelerate and help this transformation to happen, the presentation I observed last, but then I had to leave, so I think it was the second last or third last presentation. We already heard the plea to engage in an intense communication and use the power of more than one single company, but rather some networks and some communities. And that's all about the mission and the vision of ESTEP, the European Steel Technology Platform. You can see the membership of this non-profit Belgian association is covering all entities along the value chain, so from the producers, the plant builders, research organizations, other suppliers like the gas suppliers, and we also have intense RTOs, and we have an intense connection with customers and also the European policymakers, so the European Commission. And typical outcomes are mini-conferences, proposal writing. So in the area of European funding, we are very active. And we just recently also established more collaborative work towards standardization, teaming up with the existing national standardization bodies. And that's another strong opportunity to keep the European leadership, even if we are by far no longer the largest producers of steel in the world. But with the definition of standards, we can compensate this element. And last but not least, we are also facilitating the private side of a European partnership on the name is Clean Steel. And the main characteristics are summarized here. And maybe just jump into a very few elements. So it's a large instrument. We have 1.7 billion euros, 700 million euros funding available until 2027. And we are covering all the elements of the transformation pathways and give also dedicated attention to people topic and digitalization. Both were already mentioned a couple of times as being very important. And we already have now more than 30 projects running with 170 million euros funding in total, covering all these area of interventions or company pathways, whatever we call it. And one element we are quite proud of was established in the Research Fund for Coal and Steel, because here we have a very stable call, meaning that it is almost repeated year by year, so that the preparation for companies and universities to submit a proposal is easy, as it is very stable. And I just want to explicitly mention one, which is the high-force melt. It was already mentioned earlier. This is the largest project we have with 50 million size and 80 million funding. The drawback we can also say here is that Fortescue, for instance, was very strongly contributing, but finally stepped out. Also because of the long time between idea of the project and receiving the positive letter from the Commission. So let's go to the last slide, summarizing. And I've seen 1 minute to go, so I cannot read to everything. So I will only jump to my main messages. So the first is I see also the need to be much more pragmatic and visualized here. So we have many times facing many regulation and laws and bureaucratic barriers. So visualized by the Valley of Death, while in US, they don't know this. For them, this is a national, regional area, and you just have a car with air conditioning, and then the Death Valley is easily passed. And finally, the collaboration on European level, I believe, is a very strong opportunity to strengthen the competitiveness and also to keep this leadership. And as we know that the framework conditions needed to be in place are so complex, why not using more and more research projects as a test bed? So if all the communities are agreeing to be supportive for the steel industry, the research projects are at lower risk, at lower complexity, and here we can really distinguish between the lip service people and the supporters. And the ideas, I think, should first come from us, from the steel industry. They need to provide something like a package to the policymakers, and compliance is a very important element. And the result is that many times steel producers try to find a competitive business case on their own. And at the same time, Europe is competing with other regions of the world, and this may be an opening to also work more together, even at industrial scale. And I hope this will be possible in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peters, for sharing so many aspects with us, how our European Union intends to strengthen steel industry. You want to show something more? Yeah, okay. We have maybe time just for one question to make sure that you reach your flight. Which one would you like to answer?
Maybe as this was more in scope with the presentation, I'd like to jump to question number 2. Do you think political initiatives have the right focus and speed to drive necessary changes? Let's say more and more distinct activities are for sure necessary. And I also picked this because then I can do this what I forgot during my presentation. So in the recent Wirtschaftswoche, the German economic paper, there is an article on steel, I think 4 or 5 pages, and just the last line, 5 words, was the question, do we need a European steel industry? And I think that's coming back to what I said earlier. If the first 2 questions, do we need a steel industry for the various ecosystems, including defense? Yes, no. And how do we define the steel industry? If these questions are not answered, all the further down discussions are almost meaningless. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peters.